In 2024, I read 50 books, and those were a good mixture of nonfiction, fantasy, science fiction, and horror. But in 2024, I was playing a numbers game. I started out with a goal of 18 books for the year, but I passed that by early April, so I figured I would just try to read as many books as I could. Some of those books ended up being really great, and some of those books ended up being really terrible. So in 2025, I want to shift that mindset and goal from quantity to quality. Instead of reading a lot of books, I want to read better books. So I'm going to do what I've coined for myself as the Great American Novel Challenge. One of my favorite things I read in 2024 was Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, which is a book that shows up frequently on Great American Novel lists. I was browsing some of these lists from places like The Atlantic, The New York Times, Reddit, Wikipedia, so on, and realized that while I was familiar with a lot of these books passively, I had not read very many of them. So I'm going to read one per month this year, maybe more if I'm feeling froggy. And these are the 12 that I chose as the most interesting to me after combing through those lists. Somehow I made it through high school and college without having to read The Great Gatsby. A lot of people really love this book, and I mostly know it as a cautionary tale about excess during the Roaring Twenties. The only thing of this that I've ever seen was a pretty bad high school dramatization, so I'm interested to see if I like this or not. I've never read any Hemingway, or at least that I remember. From what I understand, this is a realist love story about a soldier and a nurse during World War I, and that this is one of the books that kind of cemented Hemingway at the forefront of American literature. Set in the Deep South, this one is about a deaf man named John Singer and the people that he encounters in his 1930s Georgia mill town. This one is praised for giving voice to the rejected, mistreated, forgotten, and repressed. Set during the Great Depression, this one follows a poor family of tenant farmers driven from their home by drought, economic hardship, changes to the agricultural industry, and bank foreclosures. Somehow this was also not assigned to me during high school or college, though I know it was a very popular choice. This one is mostly praised for Steinbeck's portrayal of the plight of the poor, as well as his socio-political commentary. Set in the first third of the 1900s, this one follows a family of Southern aristocrats who are faced with the dissolution of their family reputation, as well as financial ruin, crisis of faith, and death. This one intrigued me because Faulkner can be kind of a polarizing figure, and his work can be somewhat challenging technique-wise. He frequently uses somewhat loose story structures, and this one's important for its kind of introduction to stream of consciousness storytelling. I'm also partial to Southern Gothic stuff, so I thought this would be a cool read. I think we are all passively familiar with the story of Captain Ahab and the Great White Whale. I'm not sure how prevalent it is outside of the US, actually. I would be curious to know, but it should be very familiar to Americans. I was in a play that was loosely based on Moby Dick in college, but it was kind of abstract. I thought this would be a good read because I love the ocean. I love the coast and sailing and boats. And I'm also relocating to New England this summer, so it seemed like a fitting choice. Also a very big fan of the album Leviathan by the band Mastodon, which is based on Moby Dick. This is the wild card of the bunch. I chose Infinite Jest, honestly, because I'm kind of scared of it, and it feels like a good thing to tackle your fears. This is an encyclopedic novel set in a future world where the United States has combined with Mexico and Canada, and follows myriad wild characters throughout their myriad wild adventures. It's hailed as a triumph of literary fiction, metamodernism, postmodernism, and a bunch of other words that sound like college. Infinite Jest appeared on the list as the first great internet novel, as well as the great American novel of our days, which I think is a reference to like the internet age. So I figured that was worth the challenge. This is Hurston's best-known work and is a classic of a style known as the Harlem Renaissance. Set in Florida during the early 1900s, it follows our main character Janie Crawford as she grows from a vibrant but voiceless teenage girl into a woman with her finger on the trigger of her own destiny. It is widely regarded as being influential to both African American and women's literature. Set in Harlem during the 1920s, Passing focuses on the reconnection of two childhood friends and explores relationships, gender identity, and racial identity. The title is taken from the term racial passing, which is a theme of the book. It is recognized as a key piece of feminist, African American, and modernist literature. I had to read a scary story for October, and Gothic felt like the way to go. This story focuses on a collection of people, a caretaker, an artist, a paranormal investigator, and the heir to Hill House, as they hope to find scientific evidence of the supernatural. This book is highly regarded by Stephen King, and that's enough for me. Set in late 19th century San Francisco, McTeague tells the story of a couple's courtship and marriage, and their subsequent descent into jealousy, greed, poverty, and violence. Those feel like painfully American themes sometimes, and it is considered as one of the first great portraits in American literature of acquisitive society. This might be the only book that's intended to be comedic on this list, but this tells the story of Lorelei Lee, a young, blonde gold digger and flapper during the height of the Jazz Age. I think it's intended to mostly be satirical, but it's also regarded as a striking portrait of the hedonism of the 1920s. It also deals with gender roles, wealth, and class. So expect one of these reviews per month, probably in the order that I just listed them. If you've read any of these books, please don't spoil them in the comments. I want to experience them for myself.